I remember the first moment I saw Earth clearly. It was suspended beneath us like a fragile ornament, blue oceans, thin clouds, a world that looked far too soft to matter. From the bridge of the Dominion flagship Unyielding Logic, I observed it in silence while my officers waited for permission to speak. The Council's verdict echoed in my mind, a consensus forged over centuries of conquest. Humans are a myth, and if they exist at all, they are insignificant. I had repeated those words myself during the briefing. As Supreme Admiral Vale Rune, conqueror of 7 star systems, I believed them. I had crushed warrior species bred for war, shattered hive minds that spanned planets, broken civilizations whose technology eclipsed ours in elegance. Compared to those foes, this world looked unfinished. Our sensors confirmed the assumption. No planetary shield, no unified orbital defense grid. Their satellites drifted like debris, outdated, inefficient, poorly armed. There was no great armada waiting to challenge us, no warning beacons, no formal greeting. A disappointment settled over the bridge. "This will be swift," Admiral Kethrai said beside me, his voice thick with amusement. Several officers shared his laughter. I did not stop them. The Dominion did not wage war for pleasure. We waged it for order, for efficiency, for silence where chaos once thrived. Earth would be catalogued, pacified, and folded into the archives within a single cycle, another footnote in history. And yet, I could not look away. Something about the planet unsettled me, not its defenses or lack thereof, but the gaps in our data. As the flagship drifted into optimal invasion position, I reviewed the human archives one final time. They were thin, too thin. Conflicts marked as localized disputes showed casualty numbers that defy logic. Wars labeled civil unrest had death tolls rivaling planetary purges. Again and again, humans lost millions, sometimes tens of millions, and yet their civilization did not collapse. It adapted. It endured. Any other species would have shattered. Humans did not. I dismissed the thought as superstition, survivorship bias, records distorted by primitive bookkeeping. The Council's analysts assured us there was nothing exceptional here. I gave the order. Invasion Protocol, Phase 1. The hangar bays ignited with motion. Hundreds of assault carriers peeled away from the flagship, their hulls glowing as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Our displays filled with telemetry. Heat resistance holding, shield stable, descent vectors flawless. Too easy. I allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. The myth would end quietly, cleanly. Then the forward scouts went silent. At first, it was subtle, a delay in response time, a flicker in signal strength. Communications officers adjusted frequencies, recalibrated relays. Standard atmospheric interference, they said. Then another scout wing vanished. No distress calls, no explosion signatures, no debris.
Just absence. The bridge grew quieter. "Report," I demanded. "Signal loss only," the comm officer replied, mandibles tight with unease. That was wrong. Even destruction left echoes, radiation, energy discharge, something. This was like watching a thought simply stop. Minutes passed. Then another unit went dark. Kethrai's amusement faded. I did not answer. My attention was fixed on the tactical display, watching empty spaces bloom where our forces should have been. Earth remained serene beneath us, clouds drifting peacefully over continents that showed no sign of battle. No planetary alarms, no global panic, no response, as if the world itself were holding its breath. "Admiral," one of the junior analysts whispered, forgetting protocol. Yes, they should have. Every species we had ever invaded screamed when the sky fell. They broadcast pleas, threats, surrender demands. Humans did nothing. I felt something tighten in my chest cavity, a sensation I did not immediately recognize. It was not fear. Fear was sharp, immediate. This was slower, colder. Doubt. I ordered a halt to further deployments until contact was reestablished. The Council would not like the delay, but uncertainty was inefficient, and inefficiency led to failure. As if summoned by the thought, a single signal appeared on the edge of our sensors. Weak, fragmented, human in origin. not a military transmission, a civilian broadcast. Music spilled across the bridge, raw, distorted, defiant. A human voice followed, speaking words I did not yet understand, but the emotion required no translation. Resolve, rage, acceptance. They knew we were here. They had always known. I stared down at Earth again, no longer seeing a fragile ornament, but a closed fist wrapped around something hidden. And as the last of our scouts vanished from the display, one truth began to surface, unbidden and terrifying. Perhaps humans were not a myth. Perhaps they were a warning, and we had ignored it. The first ground engagement was supposed to be simple. Our strategists selected the landing zone with clinical precision, a vast human region classified as a desert, endless sand, minimal vegetation, no urban density, no cover. Psychologically oppressive terrain meant to break morale before the first shot was fired. An ideal place to demonstrate inevitability. I observed the deployment from orbit as the first shock troops descended in perfect formation, their armor gleaming against the pale surface below. No resistance appeared on our scanners, no organized military movement, no anti-air fire. Silence. Textbook compliance, one of my tacticians remarked. At first, it seemed true. Human structures dotted the landscape, small buildings, temporary shelters, crude by our standards, but all were empty. Doors hung open, lights still burned. Vehicles sat abandoned in neat rows, their engines still warm, cooling only minutes old. The humans had not escaped days ago. They had left recently.
That realization should have unsettled us more than it did. Our troops advanced, weapons lowered but ready. Thermal scans showed nothing larger than windblown debris. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, heat shimmering like a mirage. Then the storm came, not from the sky, from the ground. The first explosion tore through the lead unit without warning. Kinetic impact, solid mass traveling at impossible speed, punched through Dominion armor rated to withstand sustained plasma fire. The soldier inside did not have time to scream. The body simply ceased. Before commands could be issued, the desert erupted. Gunfire cracked across the dunes, sharp and violent, utterly unlike the controlled discharge of energy weapons. Humans emerged from the sand itself, from behind rocks, from shallow trenches invisible to our sensors. They moved in small clusters, not ranks, flanking, circling, vanishing. Our troops returned fire in disciplined volleys. It did not matter. Human weapons were primitive, yes, but brutally effective. Their projectiles tore joints apart, shattered optics, penetrated weak points with horrifying accuracy. Soldiers fell, armor breached, blood staining the sand dark and wet. Then the screaming began. I listened as comm channels flooded with overlapping distress calls, units shouting coordinates that were already obsolete, officers issuing orders no one could follow, soldiers begging for extraction that could not arrive in time. Enemy movement is contact, close-range contact. They're inside the perimeter. The feeds cut in and out, filled with static and panic. What confused us most was their lack of formation. Humans did not advance in straight lines. They did not hold ground unless it suited them. They attacked, vanished, then attacked again from another direction. The terrain was not an obstacle to them. It was a weapon. I watched one feed where a wounded Dominion trooper attempted to retreat. A human tackled him from behind, dragging him into the sand. The feed shook violently. The audio captured snarled breathing, a scream abruptly cut short. Then silence. Another feed showed a human with a shattered leg crawling forward, one arm useless, still firing until Dominion plasma burned through his torso. Even then, his finger tightened reflexively on the trigger as he died. A strategist demanded over the chaos. "They're injured." No one answered, because there was no answer that made sense. Humans did not retreat. They advanced while bleeding. They advanced while burning. When cornered, when escape was impossible, they detonated themselves, crude explosives strapped to their bodies, taking Dominion warriors with them in violent flashes of light and sand. I witnessed one such moment in chilling clarity. A human stood alone before an armored unit, weapon empty, body shaking with exhaustion. Instead of surrendering, he raised one hand, not in peace, but in what our translators later identified as a gesture of defiance.
Then the signal vanished in white fire. Shock troops began requesting permission to fall back. Some broke formation entirely, fleeing into the open desert, where humans waited. The engagement lasted less than 1 planetary hour. By its end, we had lost 3 full companies.
The humans had vanished. No pursuit, no celebration, no attempt to hold territory. They simply disappeared back into their world. Long after the battle ended, I ordered all battlefield recordings compiled. I listened to them alone in my command chamber, replaying the sounds again and again. Humans shouted as they fought. They shouted names, personal names, not unit designations. They shouted oaths, promises, apologies. They shouted rage so raw it bordered on madness. They fought not like a unified empire. They fought like a species that had never known peace long enough to forget how fragile it was. A species that had survived famine, plague, war, and extinction threats again and again by learning one lesson better than any other: endure, adapt, survive. As I reviewed casualty projections and revised invasion models, a cold realization settled over me. We had not encountered an unprepared world. We had awakened a practiced one. And this had only been their first response. The desert engagement would later be recorded as first contact in Dominion history. Among humans, it would earn a simpler name: the Warning. And somewhere on Earth, even as we counted our dead, I knew they were already preparing the next lesson. After the desert engagement, denial was no longer efficient. I ordered an immediate halt to expansionary ground operations and convened the full scientific council aboard the unyielding Logic. Losses were still being tallied, numbers climbing with every delayed report, but I no longer cared about statistics alone. Numbers could be rationalized, explained away. What I needed was understanding. Begin full biological and psychological analysis of humanity, I commanded. No filters. The silence that followed was heavy. Hours later, the first projections filled the hololithic chamber. Planetary data unfolded layer by layer, and with each revelation, the Council's confidence eroded. Earth's gravity was excessive, nearly crushing by Dominion standards. Its axial tilt produced violent seasonal shifts, freezing extremes followed by blistering heat. Tectonic instability fractured continents without warning. Storm systems erased cities. Oceans spawned predators massive enough to shatter steel. Even the planet itself seemed determined to kill its dominant species. Then came the microscopic analysis. Viruses, bacteria, fungal spores, entire invisible ecosystems that invaded human bodies from birth to death. On most civilized worlds, such constant biological assault would have rendered intelligent life impossible. Yet humans lived inside this chaos. Reclassification required, one of the xenobiologists whispered, mandibles trembling. The designation hung in the air like a death sentence. Category 9 worlds were considered theoretical, places where survival required continuous adaptation, where evolution itself was a battlefield. No spacefaring civilization had ever originated from such a planet, except this one. Human physiology baffled our models. Their bodies were inefficient, prone to failure, and alarmingly fragile. Bones fractured easily, organs degrade rapidly, lifespans were short. And yet, when injured, humans did not simply heal, they adapted. Fractured bones regrew denser, muscles rebuilt stronger after trauma, repeated exposure to toxins increased tolerance, pain receptors dulled over time, not to protect the body, but to allow continued function. Pain, for humans, was not a stop signal, it was information. Stress response anomalies detected, another scientist reported, beyond safe thresholds. Humans could push their bodies past what their biology should allow, past exhaustion, past injury, past fear. Many died doing so. Many did not. Psychological profiles proved even more disturbing. Humans experienced fear intensely. Our early assumptions had labeled this as a weakness. The data proved otherwise. Fear did not immobilize them. It sharpened perception, accelerated cognition, narrowed focus. Fear made them dangerous. Even more troubling was how humans responded to loss. On most worlds, casualties eroded morale, leadership fractured, societies demanded withdrawal. Humans reacted differently. Loss hardened them. Entire units fought more fiercely after casualties. Communities mobilized faster after devastation. Where one human fell, others stepped forward, not out of obedience, but choice. They formed bonds through shared suffering, a behavioral analyst said quietly. I reviewed footage from their own historical records, wars they fought against themselves, conflicts that should have annihilated their species. Instead, humanity emerged altered, scarred, but intact. They remembered every lesson. They have no central ruler, a counselor argued, searching for weakness. No hive command. That should make them chaotic, another added. It should, I replied. Humans were decentralized by design. Independent groups, cultures, ideologies, all often in conflict. But when faced with an external threat, those divisions collapsed with terrifying speed. Not because they were ordered to unify, because they chose to. The simulations updated. Invasion success probability dropped from near certainty to statistical impossibility. Silence consumed the chamber. At last, I dismissed the council and remained alone with the data. I replayed battlefield footage beside biological projections, historical records layered over real-time intelligence. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Humans were not optimized for peace. They were optimized for survival. Every aspect of their existence, from physiology to psychology to culture, was shaped by a hostile world and a violent history.
Cooperation was not instinctive, it was learned. Morality was not inherent, it was chosen. Peace, for humans, was not natural, it was earned. And suddenly, the greatest misconception in our archives revealed itself with brutal clarity. Humans were not peaceful because they were weak, they were peaceful because they were exhausted. Exhausted from centuries of internal war, from clawing their way out of extinction again and again, from learning at unbearable cost what unchecked violence could do. They had built rules, laws, and fragile systems to restrain themselves, and we had shattered them. By invading their world, by killing their people, by proving that restraint was no longer an option, we had awakened instincts older than their civilizations. Instincts forged on a death world. I stared once more at Earth rotating beneath our fleet. It no longer looked soft. It looked scarred, hardened, alive. The final analysis report ended with a simple clinical conclusion. Humanity should not be engaged in total war. I closed the file. Too late. Across the planet, human mobilization accelerated. New heat signatures appeared where none had existed hours before. Signals multiplied, factories repurposed, civilian infrastructure shifted toward military output with astonishing speed. They were done enduring. And as our sensors tracked humanity preparing not to survive, but to respond, I understood the true meaning of a death world species. They do not seek war, but if war comes to them, they make sure it never leaves. Orbital superiority was supposed to decide the war. From the moment our fleets established control above Earth, victory should have followed by every doctrine the Dominion had ever written. We commanded the sky, we owned the void. Our weapons could strike any point on the planet with mathematical precision. And yet, the war slipped through our grasp like sand. Human resistance did not challenge us where we were strongest. Instead, it reached upward with improvised hands and pulled us down into chaos. The first signs appeared along our supply routes. Civilian human vessels, unarmed, unremarkable, drifted into shipping lanes under false transponder codes. They did not attack directly. They collided, jammed, forced course corrections at critical moments. One such craft detonated against a fuel tender, rupturing its containment and igniting half a convoy. We dismissed it as desperation. Then it happened again, and again. Humans repurposing mining ships, cargo haulers, even atmospheric shuttles, stripping them down and rebuilding them into crude strike platforms. They lacked elegance, they lacked durability, but they were unpredictable, and that made them lethal. More troubling were the system failures. Dominion networks began to behave erratically, targeting solutions misaligned, command relays lagged, defensive protocols triggered without cause. At first, we suspected internal sabotage or council interference. The truth was far worse.
Humans were inside our systems. They're not using modern encryption, one of my chief engineers reported, voice strained with disbelief. These are archaic logic structures. In simpler terms, humans were hacking us using methods our machines had stopped guarding against centuries ago. They stitched ancient computational languages together with modern improvisation, exploiting assumptions buried deep within Dominion architecture. Our systems did not recognize the threat because, to them, it should not have existed. By the time countermeasures were deployed, humans had already moved on, leaving behind corrupted data, false telemetry, and blind spots that cost us ships. They learned faster than we could adapt. Every new weapon we introduced was treated not as an obstacle, but as a gift. Humans captured plasma rifles from fallen troops and dismantled them by hand, ignoring safety protocols that would have killed any other species. They rewired firing mechanisms, overclocked power cells, accepted catastrophic failure rates in exchange for devastating output. They did not fear malfunction. They planned for it. Human pilots were worse. Captured Dominion fighters, machines designed for neural-linked control and strict maneuver limits, were flown by humans without interface compatibility. They bypassed safeguards, ignored structural warnings, and pushed the craft beyond tolerances we had considered absolute. Our pilots trained for precision. Humans flew like they expected to die. They used their own ships as weapons, ramming, spinning, tearing through formations with reckless creativity. I watched one human pilot slingshot a damaged fighter through a debris field, using shattered hull fragments as improvised cover before colliding directly with a command frigate. The explosion destroyed both vessels. The human did not eject. What? One of my captains demanded during a debrief. I had no answer then. I would soon. Ground reports painted an even darker picture. Human units engaged knowing extraction was unlikely, sometimes impossible. Before assaults, they recorded messages, farewells, apologies, words of love meant for recipients they would never see again. Then they advanced. They laughed before charges, not with joy but with something closer to defiance, as if daring the universe to take more from them. Grief did not break them. It fueled them. Dominion morale began to fracture. Entire units refused redeployment to Earth. Veteran soldiers, beings who had survived dozens of campaigns, requested reassignment or withdrawal, citing psychological instability. Others broke entirely. Desertions increased. A cruiser defected, transmitting its surrender to human forces and offering navigational data in exchange for mercy. Humans accepted. They always accepted. The Council sent increasingly frantic orders: escalate force, increase orbital strikes, demonstrate dominance. But dominance meant nothing against an enemy who refused to be dominated.
Every escalation strengthened human resolve. Every city struck became a rallying symbol. Every civilian death added names to lists humans carried into battle like sacred texts. I began receiving direct messages. They bypassed our command encryption and routed transmissions straight to my personal channel. Human commanders, some military, some civilian leaders coordinating defense. Their voices were calm, controlled. They did not threaten us. They warned us. "You don't understand what you're pushing us toward," one message said. "We've been here before." Another followed hours later. "Leave, please." That message unsettled me more than any battlefield report, because it was not spoken in fear, it was spoken in restraint. I replayed it again and again, studying the tone, the cadence. Humans did not beg for mercy, they offered us an exit. The simulations updated once more. Projected Dominion victory collapsed to 0. Not because we lacked firepower, but because we lacked endurance. We could devastate Earth, yes, but not without becoming something unrecognizable. And even then, the models showed human resistance continuing for generations. Underground, off-world, relentless. A war without end. A war we could not win. As I stood on the bridge, watching fleets maneuver nervously above a world that refused to yield, the truth crystallized with brutal clarity. We were not fighting for conquest anymore. We were fighting to escape. And humanity was giving us one last chance to do so. Behind me, an officer spoke quietly, almost reverently. I closed my eyes, because I knew what that meant. Humans had not yet decided this was a war for survival, and when they did, there would be nothing left for the Dominion to withdraw from. The Council's order arrived without ceremony. No debate, no deliberation, no hesitation. Planetary sterilization authorized. The words hovered in the command chamber, cold and final. A solution of last resort, one the Dominion had used only twice in its long history. Both times the species in question was erased so completely that even memory became uncertain. End the war. End the mistake. End humanity. I stood alone on the command dais of the unyielding logic, the vast chamber dimmed except for the hololithic protection of Earth suspended before me. Fires glowed along its edges where orbital strikes had already begun. Strategic targets, the Council insisted. Infrastructure, production centers, pressure points. The planet did not scream. It endured. Even as cities burned, signals continued to rise from the surface. Emergency broadcasts layered over civilian channels. Human voices, panicked, resolute, exhausted, calling for aid, for calm, for unity. And beneath it all, music. Human music spilled into the void, defiant and mournful all at once. Songs transmitted from besieged cities, from underground shelters, from places that should have fallen silent. They sang while dying. They sang while fighting.
They sang while watching the sky burn. I felt something fracture inside me.
I thought of my soldiers. I thought of the screams that still echoed in my auditory memory. Dominion warriors dragged into sand, into darkness, into death. I thought of the fleets lost to improvised attacks, of pilots who never understood how the battle had turned so completely against them. The Council called it unacceptable losses. I called it a warning we had ignored. The sterilization countdown began. Massive weapons aligned in orbit, their energy signatures rising like artificial suns. Once fired, Earth's atmosphere would ignite. Oceans would boil. Every living thing would end in fire. Efficient. Final. My mandibles trembled. And then I thought of something else. Mercy. It did not belong in war doctrine. It was not a concept the Dominion valued. Mercy was inefficient, dangerous, a weakness to be exploited. And yet, humanity had shown it again and again. They spared surrendered troops, even when those troops had burned their cities. They treated wounded enemies, sharing medical supplies meant for their own people. They honored ceasefires they had no obligation to respect. Even now, especially now, they were not pursuing our retreating units, not hunting our damaged fleets, not striking at our most vulnerable positions. They could have. They chose not to. Why? The answer came to me with terrifying clarity. Because humans knew what total war did to them. They had been there before. They had nearly destroyed themselves learning that lesson, and they had sworn never to become that species again. And we were forcing them toward that edge. The Council's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and impatient. I stared at Earth, at the storms, at the fires, at the endless human signals still reaching upward, refusing silence. I realized then that this war had already been lost, not by the Dominion, but by the ideals we claimed to represent. Order, stability, control. We had become the chaos. If I followed the order, the Dominion would survive, but it would do so stained by an act no future justification could cleanse. And somewhere in the dark history of the galaxy, the last record of humanity would be a cautionary note. Stripped of context, stripped of truth. I would not allow that. Cancel the strike, I said. The words felt unreal as they left my vocal chamber. Silence answered me. I did not hesitate. All invasion operations are halted. Power down planetary weapons. Alarms erupted across the chamber, not from Earth, but from within my own ship. Council override protocols clashed with my command authority. Officers froze, caught between obedience and treason. I met their eyes. Stand down, I said. One by one, they complied. The weapons powered down. The countdown stopped. Across the fleet, engines flared, not toward Earth, but away from it. The Council's response was immediate and merciless. You are stripped of rank, stripped of command. I accepted the sentence without protest. History would decide what I was. As the fleet turned away, I waited for pursuit, for vengeance, for one final human strike to punish our retreat. It never came. Human signals continued, but they did not change. No mobilization to chase us, no last spiteful blow, just observation, vigilance. They watched us leave. I opened a final channel, broadcasting openly, without encryption. This is Supreme Admiral Vale Ruin of the Dominion, I said. No reply came. None was needed. As Earth grew smaller on the display, its fires dimming, its music still echoing faintly through the void, I felt something I had not felt since before my first conquest. Relief. We had come to erase a myth. Instead, we had encountered a mirror. And as the Dominion fled from a world that had every right to destroy us, I understood the most dangerous truth of all. Humanity had spared us, not because they could not finish the war, but because they chose not to. And that choice would haunt the galaxy far longer than our weapons ever could. I record this testimony in exile, not as a plea for absolution, not as a warning wrapped in fear, but as truth. The Dominion has erased my name from its banners. My victories have been reassigned. My existence reduced to a footnote labeled strategic anomaly. That is the price of disobedience. I accept it willingly. Because what I witnessed on Earth must not be misunderstood. Humanity does not seek conquest. That is the lie the galaxy tells itself to sleep more easily. In the cycle since our withdrawal, I have watched from afar as councils convened in panic, borders hardened, fleets redeployed closer to home. Long-standing doctrines, those built on the assumption that power flows from superiority, were rewritten in quiet urgency. The word human began appearing in threat assessments, not as an enemy profile, as a variable, an unpredictable constant capable of destabilizing empires without ever leaving their star system. Humanity did not pursue us. They did not follow our retreating fleets. They did not announce victory. They returned to their wounded world and began to rebuild. That, perhaps, frightened the galaxy more than any act of revenge could have. Our analysts struggled to classify them. They searched for familiar motives: expansionism, ideological dominance, resource hunger. None fit. Humans possess the technology to advance rapidly beyond their system now. Our abandoned wreckage alone accelerated their understanding by decades. And yet, they stayed. They fortified their world not as a fortress, but as a boundary, a line they would not cross unless forced. I came to understand why only after reviewing humanity's deepest historical records, those they themselves preserve with unease. Ages when they did seek conquest, when they did hunger for dominance, when entire continents burned under banners carried by their own hands. They learned, at a cost that nearly ended them.
Peace, to humans, is not an abstract ideal. It is not a natural state. It is a discipline, maintained daily against instincts honed on a death world, against fear, against anger, against the seductive simplicity of violence. They know exactly what they are capable of. That is why they fear themselves more than any external enemy. It is why they build laws instead of chains, why they argue instead of obey, why they hesitate even when victory is assured. And why, when the galaxy's greatest empire brought annihilation to their skies, they stopped themselves from becoming monsters again. The galaxy noticed. Trade coalitions now consult human observers. Military academies study human conflicts, not for tactics alone, but for endurance psychology. Deathworld species, once dismissed as unstable or inferior, are reassessed with sudden respect. Because humanity proved a truth the galaxy had forgotten. Survival is the greatest weapon of all. Not the kind born of strength alone, but of adaptation, of persistence, of refusing to disappear when logic insists you should. I have spoken with diplomats who met human representatives in the cycle since the war. They describe them as cautious, measured, almost gentle, until the conversation turns to defense. Then the air changes. Humans do not boast. They do not threaten. They state facts. We don't want war, they say. That certainty, quiet, grounded, unshakable, is what terrifies the galaxy. Because humans do not posture. They remember. They remember every scar, every extinction narrowly avoided, every lesson paid for in blood. And they carry those memories forward, not as grudges, but as boundaries. I sometimes replay the final images of Earth as our fleet withdrew. The fires dimming, the music fading, signals stabilizing instead of escalating. Any other species would have chased us. Humans let us go. That restraint echoes louder than any fleet ever could. Should humanity one day leave their planet, and they will, inevitably, it will not be in a wave of conquest, not in the name of empire. They will arrive cautiously, watching, learning, offering help where help is welcomed. But make no mistake, if the galaxy ever forces humanity to choose between survival and mercy, they will survive. And they will not apologize for it. This is why the galaxy fears them. This is why the galaxy respects them. Not because humans are the strongest, not because they are the most advanced, but because they are a species that learned the cost of violence and chose discipline instead. I end this testimony with the only conclusion that matters.
If you encounter humanity among the stars, extend respect. Extend caution. Extend honesty. Do not mistake their restraint for weakness. Do not mistake their peace for inability. Because the last time the galaxy ignored those truths, an empire fled a fragile blue world, grateful it had been allowed to do so.